It's my responsibility to introduce Ike Brooks, Jr., who's the Managing Director of the Partnership. Ike is the Managing Director of the Partnership, which is a human resources consulting practice, which provides counsel, advice, program design, and delivery to clients covering all aspects of the human resource management system, with special emphasis on organization assessment and organization development. Much of the work of the consultancy supports change management initiatives. Now I know why you're here, Mike. And programs to enhance and improve the utilization of human capital. Prior to launching this practice, Ike held a number of positions at TRW, which many of us should remember. It was a fine company here in Northeast Ohio, and General Electric, with assignments at the operating unit and staff levels. He is an experienced global management team member and human resources executive with a proven track record of designing and implementing effective and innovative programs in support of organizational goals and objectives. Ike holds a BS degree in social science from Coppin State University in Baltimore and is a member of the Professional Fellows Society of the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Please, let's give a Cleveland welcome to Ike Brooks.
Thank you, Randy, and good morning. This portion of today's session covers a couple of things. One, a panel discussion, and as Randy mentioned before break, to share some lessons learned from folks who have some familiarity with what Cuyahoga County is currently planning for. And the second part of that is a series of questions and answers to allow you to ask whatever questions may be going in your mind, and also to avoid that thing of when you're on the highway leaving here, gee, I should have asked this. Joining me on the panel are my three colleagues today, and I'll let them introduce themselves so you'll get an idea of who they are and from where they come. So, Rich?
Hi, thank you. My name is Rich Fitzgerald, and I serve as the president of Allegheny County Council. And for those of you running for county council, I was sitting in your seats back in 1999 as a candidate for the original Allegheny County Council. And I think similar to how your transition is going about, we elected to get rid of our county commissioner system because the people were not happy with the way the government was being run. And in 1998, we passed a referendum to form a brand new government, what you're going through right now. So in many ways, I'm jealous of you remembering back 11 years, running campaigns, going to informational sessions like this. And we have a 15-member council, and I still serve on that council, obviously, and there are 5 of us who remain from that original council. And it's, again, I can just tell you, it's an exciting time for you. Enjoy it. There's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, and I think we're rooting for you to go well.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Catherine DeLockery, and I am the Senior Vice President for Communications and Public Affairs at the Allegheny Conference on Community Development. But I'm here today, I think, because of some things that I had an opportunity to participate in some 10 years ago. As Rich mentioned, we had our referendum in 1998 to create a home rule charter with a county executive and a 15-member council in Allegheny County. And the Allegheny Conference has a long history of working in close public-private partnership with various levels of government, including our county government. And as the premier civic engagement organization in the Pittsburgh region, we helped to convene people throughout the transition process, and we were part of the effort to lay the initial framework for the county government before the referendum was held. So I think it will be an opportunity here to reflect a little bit on the past 10 years. Rich and I had an interesting ride up in the car as we thought about our shared history, and we hope to share a little bit of that with you.
Thank you. I'm Russ Pry, and as of yesterday, I had been the Summit County Executive for the past 3 years, and for the next 5.5 months, I will still be everyone's favorite county executive in the state of Ohio. That will all change in January when Cuyahoga County goes with their new county executive. But I've been a life resident of Summit County for 52 years. and have been involved in different parts of the government, on the Board of Elections, on the library board, as a law director for one of our communities, and had my own practice of law before becoming the county executive, and have been very involved since the charter got put into place 30 years ago in Summit County. So it's been an interesting journey as I've watched over the last 30 years how the charter has changed, how the personalities have had real impacts on how a lot of those changes have come about. So it will be a new journey for you all here in Cuyahoga County.
Okay. Thank you. Let me also refresh us on some ground rules. I know you've been here all morning, and posted on the screens around the room are some ground rules we'd like to play by for the panel discussion as well as the Q&A session. And the first three are simple, I think. Continue to participate and as positively and be as open and honest as you feel comfortable in this forum. I'd like you to listen openly. I've had some experience with the public forum. I'm sure that in the course of the morning and early afternoon, you're going to hear something that you think is absolutely brilliant. My experience with groups like this, that's probably something you personally offer to the conversation. At the same time, you may hear something that you believe is utterly ridiculous, but we're here to learn. We want to get a better understanding of what's before us as we transit this county to this new form of government, and that's very important. Also like us to paint pictures in words, especially when we have an input. That's not a he said, she said, but really focus the comments on the discussion points for today. As we get to the Q&A session especially, we'd like you to state your name and also share with us the position which you're seeking. Like to enforce a 2-minute time limit so that we can get you to lunch and get you to the other part where you meet some of the county heads and gain a little more insight. And there will be a timekeeper. There'll be cards that flash up that try to keep you there. And we'd also like, rather than have discussions from the floor, let's give everyone an ample opportunity to speak and share their thoughts and ideas before we get to the second turn. Do those rules make sense? Yeah. Okay, can we play by those rules? Yeah. Okay, and we'll keep them posted, and just in case we steer away, please bring us back on task. So let's start. Catherine, you have familiarity with what we're about to go through. Would you share with us some of what you believe are the most important aspects of the planning process?
I'll try. First of all, I do want to commend everyone for being here today, both taking part in this session and all of the other sessions that have been going on as part of this transition process, because it is very important to have a formal transition process and to acknowledge that there's a lot of work to be done as a community moves from one form of government to another. And so in terms of taking the very first steps, I think everyone here is headed in the right direction. And county government is a very hard job, and I also commend all of you for being, for the contributions that you make every day, those of you who are staff members here in the room, and those of you who are throwing your hat into the ring. I commend you for being willing to commit yourself to county government here, because it's important for all of us, and we say that as your Pittsburgh neighbors, because we do think that there are a lot of similarities between Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, Cleveland, and Cuyahoga County. I do want to say for the record that we do not have a professional basketball team. And so we want to be feeling brotherly now. But I would also say for the record that we are rooting for you in this process, and we're rooting for your new government, but we are not rooting for your football team. So, with those things in mind, I think overall any transition process is a balancing act. And what you're looking to balance is the combination of enthusiasm for the new thing that you are about to launch, experience and expertise. And I think you've got all of those things here. You've got them in the room today. You've got them in the transition process as a whole. And I encourage you to keep up the balancing act. The process that we went through in Allegheny County was a little bit different, but the big building blocks were the same. And I think that you have introduced here a very robust process that has a high level of community engagement, and that is very important. In terms of lessons learned, I think that the one thing that we might think about is that, like in any kind of process, transition processes have sort of their teachable moments. And we found that as we went through this in Allegheny County, that as we started this kind of process here today with folks who were beginning as primary election candidates, we could sort of talk a little bit about the county budget and the role of government. But darned if people's attention didn't improve after the general election. and there was a greater sense of focus as now our council members to be, our council members elect, were coming to grips with the very real decisions that they would be making in just a few short months. So I think that's something to think about going forward, is where are those teachable moments to really focus attention on the decision making, because that's really what's happening, is we're putting in place a new process for decision making.
Rich, share with us your perspective on that.
Yeah, and I realize for all of the candidates sitting in this room right now, while good government is in your mind, what's foremost in your mind is September the 7th and then November the 2nd. And that's really what your focus is going to be. That's what my focus was on when I was sitting in your chair. You have to win an election. That's the biggest part. But when you win that election, those of you who are successful enough to do that, it doesn't end. You then go on. It doesn't end for the people who lose either. They may be part of helping in other aspects. But it's important that as you move on through the primary and then through the general, what becomes important for specifically the council members are the relationships that you form with your other council members. There's going to be 11 of you who are on this council from different parties, and it's important that you establish relationships and credibility among the group, within your own party and within and on the other side of the aisle. So I think it's important as you move forward. One of the great transition things that we were able to do is Catherine and the Allegheny Conference had training sessions for us after the general election. So right after the November election, in that 7-week period before we got sworn in January of 2000, we went to these sessions a couple of times a week. And while we also learned a lot about government, there obviously was the jockeying of who was going to be the president, who was going to be the vice president, who was going to be the caucus chair of the Democrats and the caucus chair of the Republicans, because there was no institution in place. It was all brand new and fresh. So that's one of the things that you'll have to consider as you learn about government, but also as you learn about the politics of it.
Okay. Russ, does any of this apply, or from a Summit County perspective?
It's been a long time since we did this, but what I reflect back on is that what I think what you will see as you look back is this is the beginning of a transition process. You're going to go through this. You're going to create your home rule authority, and then you will have a living document that will still be able to be changed, and if things don't work out right now, you're going to move and change. When Summit County initially enacted the charter, they had 7 county council members elected at large. Over time, that changed to an 11-member council where you had 8 from districts and 3 at large. And we've gone through a number of different merging of offices, combining 3 offices, the treasurer, the recorder, and the auditor into a fiscal officer, merging the medical examiner's office into the executive. You've gone through a lot of those right now that Summit County has gone through, and some that we have still not gone through, so that it will be interesting to see how everyone thinks that it will work as you go forward. But what you now have in place is the vehicle that will be evolving to be able to make changes as you move forward.
Looking back, especially from the planning standpoint, are there any things any of you would have done differently?
I can't think of anything that would be done differently because the transition has to go through a natural process. And from our standpoint as a council member, the biggest thing was really building the relationships with the other council members and also developing relationships that you'll need to have with your state representatives and your congressional delegation. So, you know, the best you can do is certainly learn a lot about the government, the budgetary implications of what you do. The more you learn, the better, because the person who, you know, has the most knowledge is, you know, has an awful lot to say when it comes to the council meetings. So I guess it's just try to be prepared as best you can.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if there's anything dramatically that we would have done differently because I think we have very similar kind of building blocks of the transition process, but I would say that you cannot overinvest in communications. It's just not possible. There's an awful lot that everyone is trying to get their heads around, from the county staff to elected officials to citizens, and it's very important to, and I believe that this effort has really gotten off on the right foot because there is so much information that you've been communicating. But I mean, people are trying to learn two different things: both get caught up on how county government works right this moment, and then how it's going to work in the future, and also identifying all of the decisions that need to be made, some of which are very well understood and some of which probably aren't. And that's a tremendous amount of information, and it's difficult information, it's complex information, and you're doing it also in this environment of a very challenging fiscal situation, which I think pretty much every county in the United States right now is facing in one form or another. I think my 2 cents is, you know, keep investing in communications, and that doesn't always mean large dollar amounts. It really means using all of the channels that are available.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Catherine, on that. I mean, when I became the county executive, again, I'd lived in Summit County all my life, and like many of you who've lived here, thought you probably had a pretty good understanding and idea of what was going on in your county. And I will tell you, every day over the last 3 years, something new comes up that I didn't know, and that I continue to learn in terms of what's going on, in terms of the different agencies, in terms of different private groups that are doing different things that are out there. But it is just a huge safety net that the county provides for the citizens within the county. And then you try and put on another agenda in terms of working on economic development, and it's a whole different turn out there. So many of the things that you work on are very, very diverse in terms of being on the council. And it's a lot of government that fills in holes that other governments don't provide. So the communication, understanding all of that, it's a big task. So I think you're right, Catherine, that's just a huge, huge part of what you need to do as you go forward.
Okay. Seems like there's a theme here around information sharing, communication, and building relationships amongst and between council members. Tell us what some of the other big challenges we might experience in that first year.
Well, the biggest challenge is going to be setting up a structure. And the one advice I would give to the council is to, when you hire somebody, and I'm guessing you're going to be hiring some of your key people right after the election, so you won't even be maybe in place and you'll start to interview candidates. You want a good parliamentarian. You want somebody that understands how you make a motion, how you put an ordinance forward, how do you amend that ordinance, how do you do that structurally in a meeting place? Because you're going to have your first meeting and there's going to be 11 of you sitting there, and the whole world is going to be watching. You're going to have every major media outlet in Cleveland that's going to be there. You're going to have a packed room. People are going to wonder who's going to be elected president. There's going to be an awful lot of anticipation in this new government. And it's not like sitting around your dining room table where everybody just yells out an idea and we all just decide what are we going to vote on. You have to have a process in place. And a lot of us don't know that. I came to government in 1999 having never served in it, and most of my colleagues did as well. We really were a citizen participation government, and I'm assuming a lot of you fall into that category. So you need somebody who understands a structure of how to put an agenda together, how to publish that agenda. That's very important. You need somebody who has budgetary expertise within county government, how a budget is put together. You'll need a budget person. And then finally, you need a legislative person who can help you write an ordinance A lot of us have a good idea what we think would be a good idea to have a law. We ought to have a law to ban smoking, or we have a law that, you know, everybody's nice to each other, whatever it might be. But a lot of laws that we try to write at the county government are inconsistent or illegal, I guess is the best way to say, because state government and federal government supersede those. So to have somebody on your staff who can advise you on how to write an ordinance or a resolution that makes sense and is legal is very important. And those of us in politics, you know, we think, oh, this is a good idea, let's just do it. Well, you also need to have people that can talk about the legal framework of that.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with Rich that those are some of the biggest challenges are getting organized and realizing that because of the way the calendar works, a lot of that organization happens before to be able to pull off that first council meeting, it happens before the government is officially sworn in. And so that transition period between the general election and the swearing in, as those relationships are being built, it's also a time where a lot of that expertise is coming together to be able to support that first meeting, because I absolutely agree with what Rich had to say. There will be tremendous interest in what happens in those first several meetings of the new government. The media will be following everything, and the community will too. People will be tuning in. They'll be watching it on the web. They'll be, you know, paying attention to the steps that are taken, and it's so important to get off on the right foot. Now, having said that, we don't want to sound like we had all the answers, right? Because yeah, Rich, I'm not going to step on Rich's story because he's got a great story of how he started out. But it is important to be ready for that first meeting. Among the other challenges that we faced in that first year were, of course, the first budget process and putting together a process to take up a budget in a council situation is different than the process you put together to take up a budget in a three-commissioner situation. The rules of council, which I think Sister Joanne addressed earlier, in our particular case, we had to draft an administrative code to complement the charter, and a lot of the decisions that you're working on here through your transition and tag process, we actually worked out through an administrative code, and then the ethics code, which I think Rich is going to talk about a little bit later. But yeah, there are some very significant things that happened in that first year and even in that first week.
The one thing I think that the council members ought to be taking a look at are some various council rules that are out there, because that will govern the operation of how the council is going to work. And you will be faced with those decisions early on in terms of what are the rules that the council is going to adopt on how you proceed. And so they become very important in terms of the procedural operation, giving you the guidance in terms of how to conduct your meeting. And I know that ours, again, are constantly being changed by the council members, but they are the internal operating documents that as a council member you're going to need to take a look at and you're going to need to understand, and you're going to get faced with very early on in terms of determining how you're going to have those council rules. And I think that that will be a big part of it. You know, when I look at the legislative process in Summit County, about 80% plus of the legislation all comes from the executive's office. So most of that gets drafted and comes from the executive side and gets sent to council. And for the first 25 years of our council's history, the only employee they had was a clerk of council. And so that presented an interesting operational dynamic between the executive and the council. Since then, the council has hired a number of different support staffs. At one point in time, they had an attorney. That position has not been filled. But part of that, in terms of when they hired staff, had to do with their relationship with the executive's office, whether it was better or worse with some of the times in terms of how those moves got made in terms of hiring decisions. So again, that goes back to the ability for people to work together and set things out. But again, you'll be faced with a lot of interplay with that, but paying attention to those council rules early on and understanding them are going to be very critical to your early success.
Sounds like if we're smart, the first year starts before the first year. So sometime between November and January 1, words like structure, discipline, organization, rules, processes, procedures ought to be high on the priority list.
Very much so, and I will tell my story now from our very first beginning. We live in a county, Allegheny County is probably similar to you. Politically, it's Democratic, about 2.25 to 1 registration edge. And our first consul was, as the numbers would show, 10 Democrats and 5 Republicans. A big upset was that our county executive was elected. He was a Republican who came in for various reasons. He had never served in government before. He had been a businessman and ran as a good government, as a lot of the council members did as well. And as you can imagine, in that first, as we're organizing, there's a lot of jockeying for position for president. Well, the new chief executive, who had 5 members of his party, was able to, I'll say, pick off 2 members of the Democratic Party to support a certain candidate for president. And the other 7 of us, I'm a Democrat, we had our candidate, and the 15th member was on the fence. At the swearing in, the 15th member passed away. Well, I shouldn't say that. He was on his deathbed as we were sworn in. So at our first meeting, there were 7 people on one side, 7 on the other. We had a deadlock. We had no president. The media standing there looking at us. We looked like a bunch of fools, quite frankly. I mean, it was embarrassing. And it took us about a month to break that deadlock, to get the 7th vote, the 8th vote, if you will. So for a month, we didn't have staff. We didn't have any of these kind of things. So we had a very auspicious debut, as I will say. But let me tell you, 10 years later, just to bring it a little further, our county government is by far the most respected level of government in Western Pennsylvania. Way above our city council and mayor, way above our state legislature, and way above the federal government. In fact, our current county executive, Dan Honorato, is the leading candidate for governor to win, and we live in a fairly blue state, so he's got a pretty good chance in November. But it's the level of respect that has come about through this process. So if you have a first bad day, don't let that dissuade you, because you couldn't have had a worse bad day than we did when we started our government.
Russ, tell us a little bit about the dynamics and interplay between council and the county executive.
It's probably one of the most critical dynamics. And again, it's not unique if you think about what the president's relationship is with Congress, or a mayor's relationship with council, or the governor's relationship with the state legislature. I mean, in order to get your agenda or to get matters accomplished, you have to be able to forge those compromises and to be able to go in and work with the council. My predecessor in office was one of the smartest people in county government that I've ever known, but ended up having some issues with the council in terms of their ability to get along and to communicate. And you were able to watch where things came to a grinding halt. So you have a situation here where if you're not able to come in and work through those issues and compromise, that it can be a very, very bad day for the county, the community, and organizations that depend on support that they get from county government. So the interplay is critical to the success of where you're going to go. It's critical to the success of your major economic development projects. It's major to the delivery of services through your human service departments, because it's just a very, very important matter. In our county, all contracts that are above $25,000 end up having to go to council and have to be approved. So that you can understand this is why I may want to promote a certain contract a certain way. I still need a majority of votes on any major piece of legislation that's going to come through in terms of making that work. So it becomes a real partnership in terms of where your relationship's going to be to make sure that things are effective.
Rich, after day one, how did it work for you?
It has its ups and downs, and I think Russ hit the key when he says communication. It really is important for the council and the chief executive to communicate and be on the same page on an awful lot of things, regardless of party. Because when it really comes down to economic development, which is one of the key things that government's put in place to do, council needs to support the county executive. I often say, in foreign policy, they say that, it ends at the water's edge at the congressional level. I think economic development ends at the water's edge for council. Council needs to be behind the chief executive when he or she goes to Columbus to try to get the big dollars that are needed for big projects, when he or she goes to Washington to get the big dollars for the projects, and when he or she's working with a major developer in bringing a development together. I think, it's a united government that works the best, so council needs to work with the county executive. Having said that, there's going to be other issues in which they may just disagree on policy. But what council's role really is you are the people's voice. The county executive, as Russ said, he'll bring 90%, 80%, 70% of the legislation will come from the county executive, but it's up to council to deal with it. I'll give you one example. We made a major policy change in Allegheny County in which we instituted a drink tax, an alcohol tax, to replace property tax for funding our mass transit. It was brought about by the county executive. It was his idea to do that. But all the public hearings, all the public meetings, all of the input came through council. We were the ones that held the public hearings. We were the ones that went out into the community and got the input from, the community, the bar owners, the transit riders, et cetera, to do that. So that relationship needs to be very strong. It needs to be very honest and open. It's really the best way. But it's important that council be strong and kind of together so that they can speak almost with one voice to the administration, and that'll make the council much more effective.
Catherine, do the folks in the community see it the same way?
Well, I do think that people in the community are sensitive to the dynamics. They are watching, and they are looking for productive dynamics. And that doesn't mean that they expect everyone to agree all the time on every issue. But what they're looking for, I think, is for the executive and the council to be moving forward. If there's a difference of opinion, to figure out a way how to work that out, and not to get hung up and not to get stalemated. And I think that people do pay a lot of attention. Rich and I were talking about the number of people who actually watch the webcasts of the county council meetings. You'd think folks wouldn't tune in, but they do. And they pay attention, and they have some idea of what the issues are that the council is taking up and what the various positions are of the people on the council. So the dynamics are very important, and they're very important to the perception of the community as to whether the government is moving forward and being successful. So I do think that is something to think about. And as someone who's not in government but has the privilege of working with it, I think that I would just offer the observation that the dynamics, as we've said already today, begin early. They begin now, as people that are running for office get to know each other. And they change over time. And so the dynamics of the first week or the first month or the first year of the new government are different in that year than they are, another term or two down the road. And some of that is how the council comes together and how the trust and credibility is built both among the council members themselves and with the executive.
Now, since the three of you have an idea of how this movie is going to end.
We like alternate endings, too.
Well, tell us what some of the benefits that you've realized from this transition from the prior form of government to the current form of government.
I guess I'll go first on that one. I think it's a more open form of government. The three-commissioner system, really the three-commissioner system, two commissioners can meet in one person's office, make a decision, and and that's it. That's the end of the day. In this new form of government, you're going to be having, county council is going to be having open meetings, whether they be your committee meetings or whether they be your full council meetings. And there are two different meetings. And one thing I would recommend for your full council meetings that you have in a very open process and almost be a very structured process. The committee meetings can maybe be less formal. We hold them around a big table. It almost reminds you of a kitchen table where we kind of roll up our sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty of the amendments of legislation. But I think it is important that the new form of government, that the council hold as many open meetings and public hearings, particularly on major issues, as you can. If you're going to make a big public policy change, advertise and hold public hearings. You might hold a public hearing in which only 3 people show up. You may hold a public hearing in which 200 people show up. But the fact is, people want to know that they've had input. Even if they disagree with the decision and the ultimate vote that you make on the budget or on a tax or on a law, whatever it might be, at least you've had the open process in which you've gone forward and said, give us your input. All sides, whether they agree with you or disagree with you, that's the one advice I would say is make it as open as you can, and you'll at least get the benefit of the doubt from most people.
One of the things that I continually say is that it's really not, in my opinion, a new form of government. It's a different form of government. And that you see the different forms, you know, that I try and tell people. You look at a city government, you look at the state, you see a same structure there that you're going to come out with. But what I've seen since I've become the county executive, one of the real benefits is when it comes to the economic development, the economic development side. And under the commissioner form, if you have 2 members of your commission in a room meeting with business people, you have a public meeting under the laws of Ohio that would subject you to then making it an open meeting. And I can tell you that meeting with the people from Bridgestone, when we kept Bridgestone in Summit County, and we've been working with Goodyear on the Goodyear deal, the level of confidentiality that these companies want out there is just unbelievable in terms of what they don't want any leaks. They don't want anything until the deals get put together, get done. And when you have the executive being able to be the person in the room, meeting with the mayor of the major city that they're trying to put that together, it gives you an advantage, in my opinion, in terms of being able to work those deals. And again, they're subject to the council, but being able to have somebody there to work through the details and all of that are something that I think has given us an advantage on some of the deals we've put together down in Summit County. And I don't know that there's probably anybody in this room that's not running on part of the platform about trying to bring jobs back to Cuyahoga County. So that as you go through that and look at it, I think that that's one of the big advantages that you get to see in terms of the difference between the forms that are out there. So I think it gives, particularly in the urban counties, where a lot of the development has gone and where we've really changed since the creation of state government and county commissioners, I think it's a better forum for that in terms of being able to work with your business community.
I'll just say briefly that the 3-commissioner form of government has its historic roots. Right? It started in colonial times when the role of county government was very, very different than what it is today. And I think, as we heard a little earlier this morning, the broad scope of things that county government is charged with doing, and which impacts every citizen's life in Cuyahoga County and in every county around the United States, demands a different form of government than one that was created to essentially oversee a plot of land for the King of England, which is what the origin is for county commissioners. You may also have noticed that of people that are creating new organizations, there isn't a great rush to creating a 3-person ruling body that is both the legislature and the executive at the same time. So.
Yeah, and Russ is absolutely right. I think the most important thing, and we've seen the benefits in Allegheny County, is the economic development aspect of it. I could throw just a few statistics out. I noticed when your budget person talked that you had a 10.9% drop in sales in Cuyahoga County. I can tell you last year, I think ours might have been down 1%. Our unemployment rate is 3% below the national average. Last month, we actually led the nation in job growth, and that is really because of a county executive, and we have a good one. So it's, I mean, you could have a bad county executive and it wouldn't work. Ours is very effective, very, very good at working with the business community and attracting jobs and businesses. He also has an awful lot of clout when he goes to Harrisburg, when he goes to our state legislature, to be able to bring them together in both parties and get some of the things that we need, and same in Washington. So it's very critical and very effective, and I think you're going to benefit from this with an executive forum who can make those deals in the back room. And I know that sounds, you know, oh my God, backroom deals. Well, some of these economic development, when you're dealing with a big company, they do have confidentiality agreements. They're not going to come and put all their cards on the table if it's going to get misinterpreted or put out in the public venue. They're in a competitive market. So you need somebody who can take the lead and then work with all the other agencies or municipalities you might have to work with, and then go to council, you know, with the final deal. It obviously is going to have to be a good deal, but it's really, I think, a very effective form of the way things can run.
And I absolutely agree with the point that both Rich and Russ have made, that economic development is where you see this right away. And you see both sides of it, too. I mean, we're talking here a little bit about deals to be made, but there are also challenges that arise, right? And in Allegheny County, we faced a situation that other airports here in Ohio have faced, where there were changes by the major airline, and we were dehubbed. The fact that we had in place a county executive who understood the situation, and we had a single point of leadership there, made a tremendous difference in terms of being able very quickly to put together a strategy that pulled together both the public and the private sector to address a major facility in the county and a major part of the economic landscape for businesses in southwestern Pennsylvania. And we were able to move on that in a much shorter period of time than we ever would have been able to do in the past.
Now, at the risk of oversimplifying, what I think we've heard today, that if Cuyahoga County looks at what we're about to do, not as a new form of government, but a different form of government, we share information, we communicate beginning in November. We start building relationships between those officials elected to run the county. We put in place rules, procedures, processes, structure, discipline. The dynamics between the county executive and the county council members, they don't have to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. It's okay to disagree, but if they deal with that in ways that make sense and not always confrontational, the outcome could be openness in how the public views this form of government, and economic development should be at the head of what we come up with. Is that what I think we've heard?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. Are there any things that we haven't covered that we should have covered that we ought to keep in mind?
I want to give a couple more things for the county council, and the executive may disagree with this, but I would very much encourage county council to have its own solicitor. There will be a county solicitor, but that county solicitor works for the county executive, regardless of what your home rule charter tells you. He or she works for the county executive. Doesn't have to be a full-time solicitor, but you ought to have somebody, even if the county executive is your good friend. And I have a county executive in Allegheny County who's I'm very close to. I've been a president for the last 4 terms. The whole time he's been county executive. And often he says, well, we could save some money if you guys get rid of your solicitor. And I say, you know what, Dan, you and I are friends, but every once in a while we may disagree, and our council needs its own legal opinion that is coming from us as opposed to you. That's number one. Number two, a strong ethics code for council. And one of the things I will stress for council, especially if you're a part-time council, is that you be as independent as you can. And by that I mean, we have a rule in our council that you are not allowed to work for another elected official. Meaning you can't be on staff of a congressman, you can't be on the staff of a state senator or state legislator, so that you're not under the thumb of that person. You're not there representing Congressman X or Congresswoman Y. You're there to represent the 100 or so thousand people that you were elected by. So an ethics code that gives you a lot of independence you know, obviously the campaign finance, and you work all of those other things out, and, you know, how many relatives, and can your relatives work for the county, that kind of stuff. But you want to do it as good government as you can. But having some of those key staff people that I represented will make you a strong and effective council who can work very cooperatively with the county executive, not at cross purposes, but with that individual.
Well, how's that? The interesting thing still in Cuyahoga County will be that you still will have an independently elected prosecutor. So again, figuring out the role of the prosecutor here with respect to the role of the counsel and the legal advice, and with respect to the executive, because the prosecutor still under the law will be the representative of those different bodies. And so we went through a series of different court challenges back in the 1990s where the law department for the executive, it was determined, did not have the right to represent the county in any court proceeding. So while our lawyers help with legislation, review contracts, and do many of the internal things that are out there, we still need to use our county prosecutor when it comes to any other major litigation. And there are times now when the prosecutor's office also does prepare legislation and works for counsel. So it's an interesting, again, balance in terms of looking at how your specific government is going to be set up, because it really is the one role I don't think I've heard a lot talked about today is where will your county prosecutor fit into this, this new and different setup that's going to happen.
I guess the one thing I would say is enjoy it. And I'm sure after you were looking at that county budget presentation and you've got your binder in front of you and you're looking through all the decisions that have to be made, you're wondering about that. But there really are just a handful of people in the United States, really, who have had the opportunity to stand up a new government. And you're in the mix. So you're in a position to make a tremendous contribution to Cuyahoga County, to your community, but I hope you'll also enjoy this opportunity because it's a rare one, and approach it with a good heart and a good spirit, and I think, as we've talked about today, a commitment to make relationships with the others that you'll be governing with.
Thank you. How about questions, and any that you have? Now, how this is set up, there's a microphone here. And just a reminder, let us know who you are and the position you're seeking, and the 2-minute warning. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Barbara Ann Ferris. I'm a candidate for District 4, council candidate for District Parma, Parma Heights, Seven Hills, Brooklyn, and Lindale. And I'd ask you for your vote, but we're not allowed to campaign. First, I want to thank all of you for generously giving your time. I think I can speak for all of us. We're grateful for you sharing your experiences. I personally want to thank the whole TAG team for the yeoman's work they've done since our election last November. As a public administration student, I'm very excited about this whole process for us. My questions are 2- and 3-fold. Talk to us about professional staff. I've talked to county councils and county executive offices around the country trying to get a sense of professional staffs, because we are a part-time council, so that's one thing. Wanting to know, in the first month, the first 2 months, sort of how you balance the whole media attention. And then the third piece is from the perspective of citizen engagement. How engaged, after your council was formed, did you have a Citizens Advisory Council? We have 1,000+ people in our community that have participated in this process over the months to get us ready for this transition. So if you could share your thoughts on those, I'd appreciate it.
Our staff has very much evolved over the time. We hired people early on that were very experienced, which was probably good in some ways, but in other ways, they were so knowledgeable, they were telling council members what to do. Yeah. And you guys are in charge. I mean, that's the one thing don't ever lose sight of. The executive and the elected officials are in charge. You are put in there by the voters, so that's, you know, that's a very important part. Catherine mentioned something, and she's absolutely right. You guys are the founding fathers and founding mothers of a new government. You know, 100 years from now, people are going to look back about this change. It's going to be a big deal. So you have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. We have a staff in Allegheny County. It's a 7-member staff. We share. We have a legislative person who knows how to write the laws. We have a budget person. We have a constituent service person who deals with the public on a lot of constituent service needs. Now, county government doesn't have the same level of constituent service that municipal government does. We don't pick up the garbage and we don't do a lot of the police. A lot of that is done, zoning, et cetera, is done at the local municipal level. So it's not quite as needed, but we have a couple of people that do that and they interact. And the one thing we don't have, and Catherine alluded to, is probably important, is a communications person. We kind of do that almost as an afterthought. Maybe that's not a good thing, because the key is communicating with the public and with the media of the things that you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to invoke this because it looks like we have about an hour's worth of questions. So we'll just have one panelist respond to your question, and if there's a need for follow-up as we end the session, you can come up and speak with them.
Okay. My name's Nino Prodan. I'm running for County Council in District 11. At the onset of the new government, what was the workload like? That's basically it.
I think in a lot of governments is how much work you want to get involved with it. Which areas of county government do you want to do? Now, I'm going to make all you guys feel bad. I'm going to talk a little bit about your salaries. I don't know if you know about our salaries in Allegheny County, but we make $9,000 a year. I read the charter, so I'm a little bit jealous of seeing what you guys, and we've started out at $9,000, and we're still at $9,000 11 years later. So one of the things we probably have an advantage over that you're not going to have is at $9,000 a year, the public is very forgiving if we're at work during the day, work in our other jobs, and not at our council jobs. Your level of salary the public may demand a little more out of you. Oftentimes there's a meeting of the state, if there's a project in my district, a problem, and it's city council member will be there, and a state rep will be there, and a state senator, and a congressman. I'm not there because I'm at work. I don't get a lot of political heat for that, because people figure for $9,000 a year, we can't expect him not to feed his family. Your level may be a little bit different. It's all in how much work you want to do. Like any level of government, if you want to work hard and be effective, you can. If you don't, it's going to be up to the voters to decide if that's what you do.
One other real quick thing on that is you're also in the council, you're going to adopt a committee structure. And depending on what committees you end up on may have a lot more work and more obligations. So that's one of the things that's yet to be determined, how you're going to figure out as a council what that committee structure is going to look like and how it will function.
And with that, a meeting structure.
Right.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Chris Ronay, and I'm running in the 3rd District of the County Council, which is the west side of Cleveland, in an all-Cleveland district. I want to thank you guys for coming in to help us help ourselves, and echo the sentiments that Barbara offered to Jim and the whole county staff of Cuyahoga for putting together a good forum. My question is simply if you could elaborate a little bit compositionally on your county councils, where they come from, their background, part-time and full-time, if you could elaborate on it. And then the tagline question, I guess, is about the Ombudsman's Office or the Constituent Services. Does one person fully and ably support all of Allegheny County? And Russ, do you have an ombudsman of sorts for those that have day jobs and call in their constituent calls? Thank you.
Well, in Summit County, we are part-time, and again, we have the 8 districts and 3 at large. Council now has 2 different individuals who are assigned to constituent services who work on that and who do a lot of community outreach. They also have a receptionist, a chief of staff, and then they still have the clerk of council. So that's what makes up the composition of the staff that council has right now. One point in time, they did have an attorney. The attorney left, and they chose not to replace the attorney. It's still an option at some point in time they may go back to.
Yeah, our constituent service, when I say our, is councils as opposed to the administration. They may handle things a little bit differently. I guess it depends who the constituent calls, which office they call. A lot of our calls, when our constituent service person kind of helps them navigate through county or any other levels of government. Where do the people come from? Most of us work full-time jobs. I own an engineering business, and I never was in government until I ran at age 40 and got elected to this, quote, new form of government that's now 11 years old. We have a couple of retired people, but we have lawyers, we have sales representatives, we have a couple of nurses, we have teachers, you name it. It's kind of all walks of life. A couple people from the labor, they're labor representatives, union representatives. In the part-time nature, I'm a big advocate of it. I really am. I think it works because I think the people that serve in council also serve and live other lives. They're not totally enmeshed in the courthouse, in government, as their only way of looking at things. And I think the fact that they have other jobs and from a broad base of the county, you know, city, rural, suburban, et cetera, I think it's very, very helpful.
Good morning.
Now, Sharon, just before you ask your question,
sure.
we're going to invoke something that will make those standing behind you happy. You're being handed a number, and that's the number in line that you are, so you can have a seat, and then well, you better change numbers with someone in the back, but yeah. But if that can work, you can just have a seat, and then I'll just call the number, and we'll be set. So Sharon, excuse me for...
No problem. My name is Sharon Cole. I'm a candidate for Cuyahoga County Council in District 10. And my question is, I've worked for legislative offices at the state and local level, and the legislation was different in both areas. In one, it was more of a dream, ability to think through what's needed. The other, because I work for a committee chair, it was more focused on giving permission to spend money, to buy trucks, to buy rock salt, to do things within a municipal government. So my question is, what type of legislation would this council introduce?
Do you get the dream one?
Yeah, well, a lot of it, you will bump up against other governments. And I can tell you one thing is, and I think we've had a pretty good, effective government. We get sued all the time, and you will too. Because what happens is the people that don't like the law that you passed and they don't get their way legislatively in the votes, they're going to go to court because this new form of government that you have is going to be challenged. It's going to be challenged if you overreach your authority. Give you one example. A couple years ago, we introduced a smoking ban in Allegheny County, and it passed. We had public hearings. It went through. It was a big, big issue. All the talk shows, the media, you know, it was a big cause celeb. When it happened. And when we passed it, there were some people that weren't crazy about it. Well, they took us to court. And the way they took us to court was the fact that they said we overstepped our bounds with respect to state law. So, and they won a partial victory. It was limited in how we could do it. Well, ultimately, the state then, because of all what was happening in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, the state picked it up, and now we have a statewide smoking ban. So sometimes even the legislation that you think is legal may not be, but it'll spark interest and spark public outcry to make it occur on a different level. I mean, you can try and get involved in you know, zoning issues that you may or may not be able to do. You can get involved in assessment issues that you may or not be able to do, property assessment issues. It's you know, a lot of county government is very limited in what it does. It's the legislature and the Congress that really empower us to do what we want to do.
Two? You back?
Thank you very much. I'm Victor Voinovich. I'm a candidate for county executive. I just have to say that I'm really excited. On the way out, during the intermission, my wife said, "Are you sure you want this job?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You know, our city, the city of Cleveland, was in default in 1979 and facing the same kinds of problems that this county is facing with the budget and the loss of jobs and everything else. By 1985, we were an all-American cities winner, and we did that in 6 years at very tough economic times. The early 80s were not good times. Interest rates were very high. I am full of hope and optimism because I see in this transition team, I see in the people that are working for this county that have for too long been maligned on many things. And I think it's great to see that. I guess my question today is for Russ Pry. What quality in your previous experience helped you the most, not to win the election, but what quality was it that helped you do the job that you've been doing for the last 3 years?
I think it's the ability, you know, I have a law degree as my background and training, and I think it's an understanding about how to compromise, how to be patient and how to be able to work with people and to it doesn't always have to be about me, it has to be about getting the end result. You have to leave your ego, I think, at the door a lot of the times, because there's everybody that's going to vie for credit for different projects than the things that are out there, and it's being able to sit down, figure out what's best for your community, being able to figure out ways to get it done, not necessarily have to get your way to get it done, but to figure out the best way to make these deals happen. And so I think it's the ability to understand compromise and really being able to work through that, which has probably helped me the most in the last 3 years.
Thank you.
Okay. 3.
Hello, I'm Patty Gascoigne, County Council District 3, hopefully maybe someday. In the interest of restoring public confidence and, you know, more stable outlook on our reform government, I have this question. You know, the founding fathers in constructing the Constitution, they did have closed meetings to hash out arguments, to work out some ideas to their logical end. And they didn't want the public in on that because it was more of their, there was a lot of arguing. So are there any discussions or topics that you feel should be debated among council before being presented for public input for the sake of restoring that public confidence and private sector confidence as well? Or do you have a thermometer for council's potentially hot topics, depending on the composition, of course, between the various parties? Or have you just had everything out there for public viewing and input? Thank you.
That's a great question, because it really does go to the heart of government, and a lot of what we do on a council is done in, you know, private conversations about maybe a piece of legislation or a way to approach something, obviously subject to sunshine laws. But I can tell you, you know, a lot of a legislative body is about personal relationships. And I know one of the things I do as president is if there's a really, really hot issue between two members who are really going to go at each other up on the floor in public on TV, I'll try to bring them into my office beforehand in a private setting and say, you know, can we work this out? Can we at least come to some agreement? A lot of times it works, sometimes it doesn't. A second thing we do, which is probably more effective, is right across the street from the courthouse, there's a bar restaurant. And after our meetings in which we may have fought over a certain issue, we go and we have a beer and have a fish sandwich together. And it really goes a long way for us to work together. I mean, it's not like the Democrats sit at one table. And we all sit together, and our staff sometimes comes with us, and we are able to unwind, and we're able to talk. And I got to tell you, we've probably got more things done. The name of the place is Mitchell's. We've probably got more things done at Mitchell's in a half an hour with a beer or a cup of coffee than we did up on the floor over 3 hours of pontificating that often happens among politicians.
Well, thank you for that Yingling commercial. Number 4.
I would actually extend that to the rigatoni commercial. One of the things that we did find, Rich and I were talking, we must have been hungry this morning on the way up in the car. We were talking about the role of food in county government transition, because I think we could argue that there is one. And that we found when we were doing the sessions, particularly after the general election, as people were getting ready to take office, as we did, they were very intensive sessions, multi-hour sessions, but we always had dinner together. And for that period of time, we broke out the rigatoni. We were on a budget. And some garlic bread and you know, a salad, because we're trying to be healthy. And it really helped the other dynamics of all of the other decisions that had to be made. So I hope you'll find room in your budget for rigatoni.
4.
Good morning. My name is Danny Williams. I'm candidate for County Council in District 10. I want to thank you also for taking the time for helping us get through this journey. 2 questions. One, in the preamble to the charter, it contemplates, and I think we're all hoping that there'll be greater intra-county collaboration, cooperation. I'd really be interested in hearing what your experience has been. I mean, has this operating in this new form promoted less competition within the county and more collaboration and cooperation? And the second part is it's more mundane. Well, let me let you do that one, and I'll ask my second question. If that's
No, you don't get a second.
All right, well, my second part is that it's a more mundane question. There's a little bit of a hot topic here. What kind of physical space do you find that you need? I mean, you know, because there's going to be work to be done in between, and does your council have office space? Just how do you deal with that physical space issue?
I'll do on the collaboration issue. I will tell you, a lot of it's going to depend on the people who get elected and what their views are going to be. I mean, I make it a point to go out and work with all of our various mayors. It's very, very important to have those the relationships. Again, it's what we've been talking about in terms of the inner workings of your government or the workings outwards. I mean, you have a lot of cities and villages in Cuyahoga County. You have a lot of mayors who have their own agendas, and it's being able to go and figure out how you work with those individuals and think outside the box how to bring them in. In Summit County, we have a very active Summit County Mayors Group, and I'm a member of that group, and so I participate on that, and have worked not only with Don Plasqualik, the mayor of Akron, on putting different deals together, but with Mayor Prokop in Twinsburg, Mayor Norton down in the city of Greene. It's being able to go out and take a look and be involved in those parts of the county. And we created a community economic development forum that we actually take to various cities within the county to meet with local political officials and local business officials to talk about sharing resources in the county, so to try and build those relationships and build those ties. So there are a number of creative programs that you will be able to whoever gets elected can come up with to begin to promote the collaboration, but you can't have collaboration unless you have communication.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. And 2 things that have happened. With the election of a county council, it has given people all over Allegheny County a sense of connectivity, connection to Grant Street, which is where our courthouse is. In the previous county commissioner system, almost always the 3 commissioners came from the city of Pittsburgh. So people in the outlying areas didn't necessarily feel that they were connected to downtown. And I'm assuming that's going to, maybe the same dynamic will occur there. So people feel connected from far reaches of downtown Pittsburgh, which is where our courthouse sits. As to office space, that's a very important topic because when we moved in, we did not have any office space. We had taken over the 3 commissioners. The county executive kind of took one of the commissioners, and the county council took over the other 2. And by the offices, I mean their staff offices, et cetera. We redesigned the county council room, if you will, and built 15 offices. You're going to need probably to do the same thing. And then we set up basically a seniority system, which isn't going to work because you're all going to be coming in at the same. You have to do it by lots, and that's how we did it at first, and then people could pick. And then what happens is when somebody comes in, it's the seniority person who gets to move into a new office. But yeah, things like that the public doesn't really think about, but they're important. You have to have a place to have your desk and, you know, sit down. But the other thing we did is our staff on council really has the nicest offices because they're the ones there full-time. We are not there full-time. You know, so our offices tend not to be quite as grand, which is fine. And then we have a couple meeting rooms where you can meet with different folks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Number 5.
Hi. Hello, Phyllis Crespo, candidate for County Council District 7. I was looking at the pie charts in the initial presentation for the budget. And we all saw that there was a huge piece of the pie that went to human services, health and human services. And then there was a different pie chart that showed that a big chunk also goes to the judicial, which is in its own way also provides human services to people. I mean, that's a real entry point for people to get into the human services through the judicial. And we're talking about how the new charter, one of the goals is economic development. Well, when we looked at the pie chart, we could see that that was just a little sliver of the budget. So my question is, did you have a similar, in your counties, did you have a similar budget configuration when you had your new government come in? And if so, how did you work with that to encourage economic development, basically if you don't have a budget for it? And then if not, if that wasn't your situation, do you have any advice for a new government coming in with that sort of budget configuration and one of its main goals being economic development? Would you have any advice for us if we were to assume that we wouldn't be able to change that health and human services piece and that judicial piece, because we wouldn't want to take away from programs that are real necessary to the community? Thank you.
Well, I can tell you in the county, in Summit County, the budget is going to be one of the biggest issues that you guys are going to work on. The economic times are not good, and I don't think they're going to be good in 2011, so the budget is just going to be critical. But it is, you have a lot of mandated functions that you will find out that you have to do that will eat up a large part of the pie chart. There's just no question about that. And it comes down to what is there, the discretionary money that you have available in terms of how you're going to be able to look at that. And that's not necessarily going to be a lot of dollars that are there, but it's what you have, it's how you're able to leverage it. And I think that when I look at some of the large deals that we were able to put together, I could not have gone out and done the Goodyear deal or the Bridgestone deal by myself. I don't believe the city of Akron could have gone out and done it by itself. But being able to partner with the city of Akron, being able to partner with the state of Ohio, being able to use our port authority effectively, you're able to put those deals together. So it's looking at those monies that you have and figuring out how you can leverage those dollars that are in short supply and that will be in big demand from many people from competing interests who will be in looking for assistance from the government. It's a different world today than it was 20 years ago when private corporations weren't asking for assistance. And now, almost every major deal, there is some look to be what can they get, whether it's workforce investment dollars. And again, that's on the human service side, but it can be used as an economic development tool if used effectively in terms of how you're using your workforce dollars. So there are a number of different pots that are there that sometimes you just have to take a look at how they're being used and what you're doing and try and focus those back in terms of really meeting new job growth for your workforce is one of the things that you can take a look at.
And I'm assuming your county budget is going to be like ours. We do not budget. We don't put tax dollars into economic development. The economic development budget comes from fees, administrative costs that come in from, say, our community development block grant money. As Russ said, a lot of the big projects we do, we got to go get collaboration with the state, with the local municipality that we're working with, whether it be the city of Pittsburgh or with the federal government. So you look at different pots of money when it comes to an economic development project, and a lot of times those projects take some time in doing. But there's not, quote, budgetary things that you budget for an X amount. They have fees that they collect, and they almost kind of have to live within a budget that's pretty much mandated. And as he said, a lot of these functions you have are going to be mandates. You don't have a lot of discretion on some of the budgetary items. Human services, you know, you may put, I don't know, maybe $10 million in which you leverage $400 million from the state and federal government. So if you were to say, I want to cut $1 million out of that budget, you might be cutting $50 million out of that budget that you'll ultimately get.
Okay. And we're almost halfway there, 6 out of 13 coming up.
I would just offer one additional thought, which is that in the economic development arena, there's also an opportunity to broaden your idea of partnerships. And we work very closely, the Allegheny Conference has, the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, we work very closely with economic development, public sector partners across 10 counties in southwestern Pennsylvania, including the Allegheny County Department of Economic Development. And there may be a range of private sector and civic sector partnerships that could be out there, and this transition may give you an opportunity to revisit that.
Excuse me for cutting you off.
Oh, that's okay.
Number 6.
Rose M. Allen, candidate for County Council, District 11. I've already heard some partial answers to my question, including a beer and food summit. And perhaps there will not be an answer for solving the problem between Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. But once you are installed, and I understand that whatever we do, it's not going to be one individual who makes or breaks the county council. So my question focuses on, once you were installed, what did you do to work toward consensus building so that there isn't partisan bickering and, let's say, problems that resulted from people not remembering the reason that they were elected, and that is to put partisan politics behind the interest of serving the people of the counties. And if you could elaborate on that, I really would appreciate it.
I think it really goes to also the heart of what you're doing. And don't think that you're going to be able to divorce politics from good government. They're part and parcel of it. Some of you are going to be elected as Republicans, some Democrats, and maybe even an independent or two, I'm not sure. And those lines will form. Those groups will form. You'll form around a caucus, so to speak. I would recommend that you do, I didn't see it in your charter, but that you do select a caucus chair for the Democratic Party and a caucus chair for the Republican Party. And sometimes you can work through some of those issues at a leadership level where folks can get together and decide, is this an issue that we can work together on? Sometimes the answer will be yes, sometimes the answer will be no. And it will break down along partisan lines, particularly if things come up like a gubernatorial race or a congressional race that may, one of the people from your council may be running. Some of those things are going to enter in. So politics will enter in. It doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to be bad, but yes, good government should trump everything. And I think if you follow with good government, then you'll be rewarded politically.
7.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Thomas, and I'm running for County Council seat in District 11. And I want to thank you for being here. I appreciate it because I've learned a lot. I knew a lot, but I learned a lot. First of all, I wanted to ask, there are twofold questions. In an executive, our people, the constituents are worried about the backroom dealing. There is a process, oh, by the way, I am a councilwoman in East Cleveland, and there is a worry about backroom dealing and transparency, I call it clarity. My question here is, there has been some speculation or some mention that there are minutes taken in some areas in executive sessions. I don't know whether that's true or not. Also, I want to know, what is the advantage of having home rule in the county government versus anywhere else?
Well, I can tell you on the issue of the executive session, I mean, the Ohio Sunshine Law, which is in the revised code 121.22, yes, really spells out how you're supposed to do an executive session and under what circumstances you can do it. And I know in Summit County, we follow the state law with respect to the Sunshine Law, how an executive session is convened, what the subject matters are that are allowed to be talked about, and that we're pretty strict in terms of our compliance, in terms of how we follow that. I think so you don't get a lot of backroom, what I would call backroom deals. Now, are there discussions that council members have between themselves? Do they go over? I mean, we have what we call the West Office in Summit County, which is Rockney's Pub.
Here it goes.
So I would suspect you will find that there will be some place in Cuyahoga County that will be a place where people go and congregate and have social, you're going to have social discussions. It's human nature that you do it now as a member of your council. I don't know of any other council or member that's out there that doesn't have those kind of relationships. So there will be ongoing discussions and things about people. You may have a position that you're going to lobby for with your colleagues, and you will call them individually or meet with them. But the law permits all of that. That's not a backroom deal. That's you going out lobbying for your position and advocating for what you think the cause should be. So I think that if you follow the Sunshine Law and do that, I think that should eliminate those concerns about what goes on. Now, if you don't follow them and you go and have majority meetings and violate those things, that's a problem, and the law provides penalties and limitations for people who don't do that.
Okay. As number 8 is coming up.
I had another, you didn't answer.
Oh, you didn't answer the second part of your question?
No, as far as the home rule.
Okay. Excuse me, Barbara.
I'm sorry, that's all right.
It depends how you define home rule. I mean, I think it's a good form of government, but a lot of what we consider home rule, you're still going to have to go to Columbus to get permission to do. We have to go to Harrisburg to get permission to do. So you're limited in how much home rule really is.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking, because of the fact that in the small communities there is a home rule, but there is still a disadvantage too, because you can be overruled in the home rule.
Right.
Okay.
You do have the ability to, in Ohio, like you have a provision here for an internal audit department.
Yes.
You'll be the second county to have an internal audit department, and it's a result of having the home rule authority who will help monitor budgetary constraints, and you'll find out. Right now, Summit County is the only county that has an internal audit department. So, and again, the test out there is whether or not this is something of local concern, and as long as it doesn't exceed state law in various areas, you can have changes that don't exist. I mean, Summit County does motor vehicle gas testing, and we're the only county in the state that does that to make sure that people, that the quality of gas is correct. And our county fiscal officer implemented that under the county's home rule program. So there are some things that you can do that under home rule that you don't, that vary from what's in the state code.
Thank you.
Okay. As number 8 is coming up, just a reminder, you have some survey feedback forms, and would appreciate, in the spirit of continuous process improvement, so that we can make even better these kinds of forum as we go forward. And there's a place for you to deposit that as you leave.
Hi, I wanted to thank you guys for coming out and being so informative. My name is Patrice Brown, and I'm a candidate for 9th District County Council. And I believe you addressed this question earlier, but I wanted you to elaborate on it a little further. My vision in creating jobs in Cuyahoga County is through economic development of lead zoning and regionalized sustainability. And I wanted to know, how do you determine the departmental resources you borrow from to spur economic development outside of grant funding? Thank you.
You have to look at the programs that you have there. And one of the things that I talked about earlier was Workforce Investment Act dollars and how you're able to use those training dollars to help spur economic development. And so that is one of the areas that you have out there. I think that you can look to again, then it becomes the partnership, it becomes looking at what the issues that are there, what the public purposes of money are, what your borrowing capacity can be to issue bonds. You know, part of what we've looked at in some of these deals are where do we put a parking deck that has a public purpose that we are able to fund through our bonding capacity. So there's a number of different ways in which you put an economic development deal together that people are going to look at and say, okay, this is why this all works, and finding, again, it's working with the other people that you have in the community. So on both the public and private side to make these deals come together.
It's not just the grant making, but that's important, obviously. And just to echo what Russ said, there are other things that county government does. So if you look, for instance, at what the infrastructure plans are and whether it's possible to focus those infrastructure plans over a period of time. We had some success with that in Allegheny County by focusing our attention on our airport area because we saw that there was real opportunity there to develop sites that the private market would then truly develop and put businesses on if infrastructure was put into place. And that became a true strategic goal of the county government, and then in partnership with other county governments, because we weren't just talking about Allegheny County when we were talking about the airport. So there are other ways to approach economic development that are not purely sort of line item departmental budget issues. It's really bringing, casting a new eye at all of your resources and thinking about how you can align them.
Yeah. Real quick, one other thing we have in Summit County is we have the Department of Environmental Services that does a lot of the sewer work and things throughout the county. So again, it's that infrastructure, being able to extend sewers to areas that don't have sewers, that can make a huge difference in terms of being able to draw in businesses when you have that capacity.
Number 9.
Hi. Thank you for bringing your insights from Summit County. I was born in Barberton, Ohio. But I live in the inner city of Cleveland now, and I'm running for District 7. That's Wards 3, 7, 8, and 9. My name's Tim Trogdon. And my question is, we've been presented with a lot of information about, you know, dealing with a budget. So we know that's going to be an important function or a role. However, people who elect us are expecting more from us. So they're going to call us up and expect us to solve a problem with one of the agencies that we were talking to out in the hallway that are at the tables. Can you give us a specific example of an agency that there was a problem brought to your attention by a resident and you were able to solve that problem and how you went about doing that?
Well, I receive constituent calls, and I will tell you, much less calls today than email. You will find that the number of emails you will receive if you get elected will outnumber your phone calls vastly because we've changed in society in terms of how we now communicate. But typically, if I will get a complaint about the Summit County Children's Services Board. I contact the director over there, and typically with a referral, then I get a response back that the matter's been handled or somebody's addressed it. So again, and part of my day, I sit down and figure out how to reroute various emails that I get in to departments who can help and answer questions that go on. So I think, again, you have to know who your partners are. You need to know who the contacts are that are out there, and then you need to be responsive to those type of constituent concerns. I was lucky when my first job was a staff representative for Congressman John Seiberling, so I spent 4 years listening to complaints and people who had problems with veteran Social Security matters and everything. So learning to know who the contact peoples are in the various agencies so you can connect them is a big thing, because you'll get a lot of contacts because the people contact the county because and a lot of times they don't know who else to contact.
One of the powers and duties that the council is going to have is going to be approval of appointments to boards and commissions that the county executive has. Take that very seriously. One rule we put into place was if you're appointed to a board, you have to come before council. You can't phone it in. You can't say, I'm busy. You got to show up. We have an appointment review committee that we created on council, and that person interviews each and every person. Now, we probably do a couple of hundred a year, 300 or 400, and I would say 99% of them go ahead and get approved properly. But we had one agency, our community college in Allegheny County, that a few years ago was having some problems, and we had a disagreement between the council and the executive. And again, the executive's my good friend. He put some people up. We interviewed them very harshly, I guess is probably the best way. We asked some very pointed questions, and ultimately we decided not to approve that board member. It was only, I think it's a 15-member board. That sent a signal that was unbelievable. The second board member decided to withdraw before he even came before the appointment review committee. And within a few months, the president of that institution resigned. That 3 years later, I can tell you, our community college has made strides forward. It's a very respected organization. So that was an area in which council, we couldn't put the president in, we couldn't do a lot of things, but you have a lot of power to bring light and ask questions in a public session that really can change things.
We follow a very similar process in Summit County where the appointees come in and report to council and go through a question and answer period. And I think I have 500 board and commission appointments.
Okay. Number 10. We're rounding third.
I am Pete Mattia, County Council District 1. Thank you all for coming. We have community engagement and yet are expecting not even a mediocre voter turnout in September. Did you and your county experience a similar experience? And what can we do as candidates to change that voter turnout? We're going to spend $3.8 million, and they're expecting 15% voter turnout for the primary.
It's hopefully you're getting the plain dealer, the Cleveland news stations to build up as much as you can about it. I mean, it's a special election. Historically, you don't get high turnouts in special elections. So I mean, it will just be difficult getting people to get engaged and get out. And it's a fact that you look at, you know, if we have an August special election, we know that the turnout's going to be abysmally small for that. It's how do you generate voter interest? And that becomes through a campaign. You have a large campaign going on. I think there's 90+ people running for the county council. I would hope that through those various campaigns that would generate some interest for people to come out to the polls and vote. But again, it's a constant battle that we face. And you know, you look at the cycles. It's, you know, presidential years we have the highest votes, and in off years the voting turnout just falls off. So it's just hoping that the media and can really pump it up.
Allegheny County, you did yours a lot sooner or more recently than Summit County. Did you experience anything like this?
Yeah, I mean, Russ is right. I mean, you know, you really want to reach out and get the voters, get people engaged. They often don't. They have their busy lives. They have other things. They take government for granted in many ways until something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong or there's a scandal, they're going to show up. They'll show up and vote in anger maybe in many times. We hold our budget hearings every year. That's the biggest thing that we do. You might get 3 or 4 people to show up at the budget hearing. We're going to vote on a $750, $780 million budget on how to spend their money. You know, you hope the media gets the word out. You hope people get engaged. You hope young people show up. But traditionally is the voting group that doesn't necessarily come out except for presidential years. And all you can do is encourage people to engage, because the more people are engaged in their government, I think the better government's going to be.
11.
Good afternoon. My name is Julian Rogers, and I'm a candidate for County Council in District 10. This question is a follow-up sort of to Ms. Allen's question regarding some of the conflicts that this is particularly directed to Mr. Fitzgerald, regarding some of the conflicts that some of your fellow council members have seen as a part of the Democrat and Republican conflicts. And I'm wondering if you feel that Allegheny County would have been better served with nonpartisan elections in these races?
I think it would be unrealistic. I think that's the problem, is because the way our structure in America is we divide it up into two parties. Some for bad, some for good. We don't have a parliamentary system. That might be a healthier system, but we just don't have it. I can tell you it also comes down, as I said, relationships, trust, and credibility. There are people in my party who don't think have that much credibility. And there are people in the other party who I may disagree with, but I know their word is their bond. So a lot of it comes down to your own personal integrity, your own personal credibility that you have, and it's a partisan process that we're in, and hopefully working through that, you do it in a respectful manner, you can come up with good policies.
12.
Hi, I'm Don Scipione, and my name tag says that I am the county executive, but I'm still gathering signatures to qualify as an independent candidate. I had 3 questions, and you've answered them all, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And lucky number 13, which is the final number, by the way.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Bob Sapple. I'm a candidate for county executive. And I'm not looking for luck, I'm looking for blessings.
Okay.
And 13 is the unlucky number, but 7 and 11 is blessed. But I'm going to go as number 13. First of all, secondly, I'm from Trumbull County, which is like midway between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. So growing up, I had a struggle between the Browns and the Steelers. But I'm a Brown person, not just in color. As you know, Trumbull County is the former originator of Connecticut Western Reserve, which transited into Cleveland, which is right kind of between Akron, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. So we're in the middle. In 1959, 1960, I was a part of a regional government group. We talk about regional government, including that area, so we know a little bit about it. My concern today is I drive from Cleveland and from Lake Erie down to Cincinnati to the Ohio River. I see very few people look like me with a hard hat on. In terms of diversity, the Pittsburgh-Allegheny area is similar to Cuyahoga County. And I'd like to know how you folks in Allegheny County have been able to transcend maybe what we ought to be doing here in Cleveland over to Akron. I travel to Akron and to Pittsburgh from time to time. When I talk to people of color, they feel that they have not been given the opportunities to position themselves to take advantage of various resources in these political arenas. That's why I'm throwing my hat in the ring to bring out some problems and concerns that need to be addressed, because the current people who've been announced in Cuyahoga County have not been discussing diversity and equal opportunity, and those things are concerned to at least some 28 to 30% of the population here in the county. Again, if each of you individually talk about what you're doing to address this problem, I'd like to hear it. Maybe some other folks would too.
Well, I can tell you from my standpoint, our hiring and promotional processes, I am very sensitive to making sure that we look at diversity issues within the workplace. And so I don't have my current statistics, but I think they would show that we're above average in terms of the percentage of population. I know in terms of promotions, recently we've advanced a number of people of African American descent in terms of looking at ways to make some changes within our Department of Job and Family Services. But I think as politicians, we are always, I think most of us are sensitive to those issues and begin to look at ways in which to address them and work through the system. So.
Yeah, and we certainly struggle with the same thing in Allegheny County and in Pittsburgh. And we've passed a lot of laws on county council to try to, that there's going to be minority participation, there's going to be diversity, and sometimes we reach those levels and sometimes we don't. And I mean, the county executive and administration, they do what they can. And we make sure that our board appointments look like Allegheny County, that the people in management positions across the board look like the citizenry of Allegheny County, et cetera. So we work very hard to do that. And one of the things when I talk about diversity, and yes, how's Pittsburgh doing so well, is I think we've really done a great job in diversifying our economy. We still have heavy manufacturing. We still have a lot of people that wear those hats. We have a $1.5 billion steel mill investment going on in Allegheny County. We have over $1 billion in a stainless steel plant that's being built in Allegheny County. We've also increased our corporate headquarters. They've gone up 69% over the last 5 years. We're growing in our life sciences. We're growing in the energy field. We have nuclear facilities that are manufacturing and research facilities that are there. Natural gas with Marcellus Shale. There's a whole broad base of economic growth that's going on in Allegheny County, because we kind of learned from 30 years ago to put all your eggs in one basket can be a bad thing, and we suffered more than any region, including this region, of any place in the country. And it took us a long time to get out from under that. And you know, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've kind of turned the corner. And probably the proudest moment we had was last September when President Obama brought the world to Pittsburgh in the G20, and he got up and he said, this city and this region has shown the way forward, how to diversify their economy. And of all the Super Bowls we have won and all the Stanley Cups we have won, I can tell you, I understand that. We're Pittsburghers, though. Nothing made me prouder than to hear President Obama say that about our region. So that was our proudest moment as a 51-year-old. That's the proudest moment I've had as a Pittsburgher.
Very good.
Well, as we close out on that note, this has been said a couple of times, several times in fact, to thank our out-of-town guests for sharing with us lessons learned, best practices, and giving us some insight on the way forward. What we've attempted to do during the entire day is to share some information about basic county services and to also set some expectations for all of you, and especially those who will be the successful candidates as we move forward with this not new but different form of government. The kinds of things that we need to do to make sure we negotiate those obstacles and challenges and to make right what is going on in this region. I'd like to thank you personally for playing by the rules. Really appreciate that. We've had some healthy conversation. I'd like to thank you for extending the time from the agenda for being here to make this happen. And finally, one more reminder of those feedback surveys to make sure that we get some feedback so we can make these kind of sessions even better. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give another round of applause to our panelists. We have Catherine, Russ, Rich, and Ike. Thank you for a job well done. Just a few closing comments, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. McCafferty. We did want to pause and thank some county staff and some volunteers that really made today possible and really acknowledge their efforts from the county, including Debbie Dowd, Rich Smith, Mary Danahan, Kelly Neal, Bonnie Thomas, Linda Ryback, and Patty Davis. And volunteer list includes Linda Barley, Lorna Wisham, Jackie Gillian, and Dr. Bruttany, who's been our timekeeper to the right here. We want to ask you to please remember to complete the exit surveys if you haven't yet. There's Elise Lappish, I believe, is in the back looking for those, but there's also a box that you can drop those in. She's waving that in the back there, a purple box. Please drop those off. Also, as you go to the information tables, we also want you to know that several of the county officials that presented earlier that you didn't have a chance to dialogue with in terms of Q&A are still here, and I think Mr. McCafferty will talk about that. But if you all would wave your hands just so that people can see who you are. I see Rick Warner here. Did I see Matt in the back? Joe and Joanne are here. So please feel free to approach them with your questions. Also, stay tuned for future forums. We, as you have heard several times now, there will be more of these coming up in the near future. I think we'll hear about one of those from Jim. And I want to wish you all luck in your respective campaigns, and I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I'll turn it over to Mr. McCafferty.
Again, thank you all for coming out, and we appreciate, you're all very busy people, giving us a full morning of your time. On July 28th, I think that's a Thursday, our Department of Development, in conjunction with our Cuyahoga County Next Advisors Economic Development Group, is going to have a function at the Stokes Auditorium at the downtown Cleveland Library from 10:30 to 1. We've invited all of the executive candidates to come and speak about their vision for economic development in the county and job creation. Unfortunately, there was not enough time to invite at this point all the council candidates to do the same, but we have invited all of the exec candidates. If any of you are here or exec candidate didn't get an invitation letter, please come and see me, because our intent is to open it up to all of you. We want to invite everyone that's here today to attend that forum. Again, 10:30 a.m., July 28th, Stokes Auditorium of the Cleveland Public Library. And the rest of us will be here for an hour or so to answer any questions you may have about county government. I know as we spoke, some people had hands up and we couldn't take your questions, but we'll be glad to stick around and answer any questions that people have. Thank you, good luck, and we'll be talking again.